Professor Hyman, we don't know who is responsible for the assassination of President Kennedy. What we do know is the media dropped the ball.
Absolutely, and I think at first they didn't follow this the way they might have because they were instructed by the FBI and the Justice Department, probably on the rationale of national security, that it was best to go along, that the government had figured out what had happened. This close cooperation between the media and the government that had started with World War II, I think was still there during the height of the Cold War, and that's why they felt obliged to not ask the questions that were being asked in the European newspapers during that time. And Europeans were far more open to the idea there could be a political assassination of a leader. We were not seeing that in the press, and essentially it was the public that was asking the toughest questions, and the alternative media, magazines like The Nation or The New Republic, that were raising the questions. And it took a while for the public to read through the Warren Report, 888 pages in the 26 volumes of hearings and exhibits, to recognize both the contradictions and what was left out. So you had a critique of the government report, and as that started to percolate through the public and through the alternative media, the mainstream media did start covering this by 65 and 66. I think there were hundreds of reporters that wanted to do the story. They were called off by senior management because management had cooperated with the CIA, with government officials. It was still the Cold War. There was a Cuban Missile Crisis just a year before. So there was a sense that if national security issues were in play on this, and there might have been connections, we wanted to avoid World War III. Nobody knew Oswald's connections. So I think at first there was a sense of cooperation to maybe calm the public, because goodness knows where this really would go. After the Warren Report was released, it gave the appearance of being an exhaustive report and was seen as such by major mass media outlets, with a sprinkling of questioning from the alternative media that actually had been there all along. And the media, again, was not allowed to be part of the Warren Commission hearings process. Right. So it took a while before even those who were well-meaning in the mainstream media and the alternative media and the public to ask a better set of questions. And those questions started to cohere so that another narrative was out there about the forensic evidence, and some reporters were writing on it. And I think Dorothy Kilgallen is the most famous, the leading columnist of the day, who had her TV show, who was breaking new material on Jack Ruby and his ties to the mob. All of a sudden, at the peak of her career, supposedly commits suicide at the age of 52. She was the lead reporter from the mainstream media that was breaking the story. And a number of people have written books saying there was foul play. And I think there might well have been. She was the reporter that was breaking the story the most by 1965.
Mal Hyman teaches sociology and political science at Coker University, which is in South Carolina. So, of course, we talked about one-on-one communications in the digital age and what's going on with politics and the media and charges of fake news this year.
Well, it's ironic that an authoritarian president like Trump uses the term fake news to delegitimize his enemy, just as Joseph Goebbels did to opposition in Germany, to call the press the enemy of the people. And then we have Fox News that cooperates with this administration in an uncritical way, essentially as a propaganda arm of the Trump administration. Turning the clock back to 1963, during the Cold War, the cooperation took a different form, and on grounds of national security, there was cooperation on questions of foreign policy and defense, and crisis of political assassination, where there was cooperation with the media and people at the highest levels of government. Now, those connections, while ongoing, are difficult to nail down in specifics. But we do know in general that that was the case, and that the media did good reporting on the Vietnam War, but was constantly barraged with Defense Department reports, the Friday Night Follies, where the Defense Department would give their version of what was going on in Vietnam. Bottom line, as we've alluded to, free press is essential to democracy. It's the lifeblood of our democracy. And if I'm to share from James Madison, popular government without popular means of acquiring information is but a prologue to a tragedy, a farce, or both. Poor reporting over decades have left America with more problems economically, environmentally, geopolitically, so that as we don't solve our problems because we have had a lack of information, it sets the context for a demagogue to get elected. And we also have a unique media at this point in that Fox really isn't reporting. They are a propaganda arm set up by Roger Ailes, who worked for Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and actually for Nixon before that. And it was avowedly conservative Republican, but also supporter of Trump. So that what comes out of there is more propaganda than news, and it's pretty sophisticated for the American public. We didn't have anything like that during the time when John Kennedy was assassinated, or even in the 1960s. We also have a corporate-owned mass media that has never really covered issues of labor, working people, minimum wage, corporate pollution the way they needed to, because it was corporate-owned. So we've had news that was fake when it came to the rights of workers and the environment all along, but that now is added to with the whole Fox network, which is avowedly pro-Trump, other than a few mild dissenting voices, and has kept the president's approval rating up in the high 30s, which has left Republican elected officials afraid of taking him on. And the hammering away at the mainstream media has left them more cautious in criticizing President Trump, because they know they're going to be hit not only with Fox and Twitter, but with the propaganda efforts of the presidency. And it's left a weaker mainstream media as a balancing force in trying to create truth for the American public in our marketplace of ideas. The digital revolution, as we know, is cut into newspapers, radio, and TV markedly, which means there's less trained reporters out there to cover these stories. And they all take note of where the rewards are and where the potential punishment is. If you say something or write something critical about this administration, there's going to be significant and nasty pushback. And there is in authoritarian regimes, and we seem to be drifting that direction. So you're right, the digital revolution is a critical factor. There are just less trained reporters out there trying to do the investigative reporting.
I'm Gloria Moraga, one-on-one with Mal Hyman, author of Burying the Lead, The Media and the JFK Assassination. Available on Amazon.